off-limits, restricted. They try to keep these places hidden, but the truth always finds a way out. From forgotten military bases to clandestine research facilities, these abandoned locations hold the echoes of dark government projects.
Delaware. Fort Delaware, built in the 19th century to protect the ports of Wilmington and Philadelphia, served as a prison camp for Confederate prisoners of war during the Civil War. Almost 13,000 prisoners were held at one time, and around 33,000 were kept there in total over the course of the war. Now, conditions were rough, and around 2,500 men died at the fort. The fort was then abandoned towards the end of World War II and became a state park in 1951. Today, it is extremely haunted. It's rumored that throughout the parade grounds, Confederate spirits roam, still trying to escape from the fort. One of the most popular stories is of an attempted escape from a Confederate drummer boy. Legend has it he tried to fake his own death in order to be transported back across the river in a coffin. Waiting on him on the other side of the river were either sympathetic Union troops or fellow inmates who were supposed to free him from the coffin. Unfortunately, a shift changed SWAT personnel, and instead of being freed, the boy was buried alive. Now, there's also a photograph that was taken of a ghost there who's called the Blue Man, and this place is just filled with ghosts roaming around. Number 9. Poinsett Bridge. Poinsett Bridge is the oldest bridge in South Carolina and perhaps the entire southeastern United States. According to local folklore, Poinsett Bridge was built on the site of an old Indian burial ground dating back to when Cherokees were the only inhabitants of the mountains of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Tennessee. With this, it's no shock that this place is haunted. Other stories go that some of the men who worked to build Poinsett Bridge died during the bridge's construction due to a variety of illnesses, one of which was malaria. These men were then supposedly buried under and even within the bridge itself. Now, according to one legend, a slave was once hung under Poinsett Bridge and his ghost still haunts it, said resident Doris Davis. The bridge is haunted by those who helped build it but got none of Joel Poinsett's glory. The ghosts of the slaves who died during construction sometimes reappear as lights in the surrounding woods and on the bridge itself after dusk and hover in mid-air for a few seconds and then vanish. Number 8. Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State Penitentiary is a former prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The punishments here were horrible. There was a water bath in which inmates were dunked, then hung up on a wall in winter until ice formed on the skin. There was the mad chair, which bound an inmate so tightly that circulation was cut off, later necessitating amputations. There was the iron gag, in which an inmate's hands were tied behind the back and strapped to an iron collar in the mouth so that any movement caused the tongue to tear and bleed profusely. And then there was the hole, which was an underground cell where prisoners had no light, no human contact, no exercise, no toilet, and little food and air. With all these horrors, it's no shock that the place is haunted. Cell Block 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling, Cell Block 6 for shadowy figures darting along the walls, and Cell Block 4 for visions of ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers. There's footsteps, and one of the most legendary tales comes from Gary Johnson, who helps maintain the crumbling old locks at the prison. In the early 1990s, he had just opened an old lock in Cell Block 4 when he said a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell. He also added that tormented faces appeared on the cell walls and that one form in particular beckoned to him. Number 7. Bodie. Bodie is a ghost town located in California. In the 1870s and 80s, Bodie boomed when gold was found in the hills surrounding Mono Lake, which at one point was home to 10,000 people. It's now a state historic park, with some parts of the town preserved in a state of arrested decay. Now, there are many reports of supernatural activity here, including ghost sightings and music playing from shuttered bars. There's also a legend that any visitor who takes anything from Bodie, even a rock, will be cursed with bad luck and health problems upon leaving. According to park rangers, many who have taken things eventually return them to the park to rid themselves of this curse. Now, the Gregory House is said to be haunted by the ghost of an old woman. Guests and staff have reported seeing her sitting in a rocking chair knitting an Afghan. Other times, the rocking chair has been seen rocking on its own. The Mendocini House is called home to several friendly ghosts. One is thought to be Miss Mocindy, who loved to cook her Italian food, and rangers report today that they often smell the delicious aroma of her cooking cooking when they enter the house. Number 6. Kerr's Run Colored School. This schoolhouse for Black American children is one of the oldest remaining in southeastern Ohio. Currently, it's boarded up and overgrown with brush. The school educated children from the 1st to 8th grade, including James Edwin Campbell and James McHenry Jones, first and third presidents of what is now West Virginia State University. The school remained in operation from the late 1880s through the early 1900s, and in 2007, a historical marker was added to the school site. The sign briefly documents the history and legacy of the school. Now, the school is right beside an old church, and you can visit outside, but you shouldn't try to enter either building as they are in unsafe condition. Number 5. Franklin Castle. Rumors about the eerie castle began to surface after multiple deaths occurred in the Tideman family while living in the mansion. Hans, the father, allegedly tore down another house on the property where 4 of his children had died. His first wife, Louisa, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s, and he would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they'd encountered a crying girl in white on the 3rd floor. But when Miss Romano investigated, no one was there. Soon, the family started hearing haunting organ music and heavy footsteps. 2 of the older Romano children woke up one night to find something yanking blankets off their bed, and Miss Romano once awoke to find herself screaming on her bedroom floor with an unseen presence screaming beside her. A priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did, but the hauntings didn't stop when they left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Unfortunately, this house is privately owned, so you cannot go and explore all the spookiness, but there is a lot of rich history here. Number 4. Warner and Swayze Observatory. The Taylor Road Observatory was gifted to the Case School of Applied Science in 1919 by the Warner and Swayze Telescope Company. The original building was a domed tower construction with a powerful telescope that took advantage of the relatively undeveloped Cleveland sky that was at the time, much more free of light pollution. The site continued to develop in the decades, growing with more buildings and facilities, but unfortunately by 1950, the growth of the nearby city was shining too much ambient light into the night sky, and the telescope had to be moved to a new location in Arizona. The Taylor Road facility continued to conduct astronomical research in the 1970s, but the site was completely abandoned in 1982. Vines and decay accumulated on the walls as time and neglect took their toll on the observatory. However, it was finally repurchased in 2005 by real estate mogul Nair Al-Mahid, who planned on returning the site into a luxury home. Unfortunately, his renovation didn't happen because in 2007 he was convicted of fraud and sent directly to jail. Today, the observatory continues to stand off Taylor Road, and it's best not to trespass and enter the building though because the area is unsafe. Number 3. The Peters Cartridge Company. The Peters Cartridge Company was once an integral part of the local munitions production industry, but now the factory is abandoned. Built in the 1860s, a large building complex was established to support the Peters Cartridge Company. The factory began producing shot and cannonballs for the Union Army during the Civil War, and then continued to produce American munitions into the 1950s. The factory had a lot of accidents though. In 1890, several train cars loaded with gunpowder collided and exploded, ending the lives of 20 factory workers. There were a number of fires and machinery accidents as well, leaving employees maimed and physically disabled. Before the factory finally closed, the site was repurposed to press vinyl for Columbia Records, but eventually nothing was made of the tall brick buildings. As the factory buildings are extremely decayed, local police supervise the Peters Cartridge Company closely. Urban exploration is not advised as floorboards are rotten and elevator shafts are empty in the buildings. Number 2. Helltown. Yep, you heard that right. Why anyone would want to go to Helltown with a name like that, I have no clue. Founded in 1806, Boston Village, aka Helltown's claim to fame was that it was standing as the oldest village in Summit County. Boston's relatively uneventful life took for a turn for the worst in 1974 when the National Park Service decided that Boston Township would be the new home for a new national park and began buying the properties of its longtime residents. The empty empty homes were boarded up and adorned with US no trespassing signs. But then the government quickly fell behind on its plan to create the park and the village sat neglected. The hellish aura of the area only continued to grow when rangers visiting the site became ill and covered in rashes. It was soon discovered the dump was highly polluted with toxic chemicals improperly disposed of. Also in the village there is a church which is said to have been built by Satanists, complete with upside down crosses. There's an abandoned bus that is said to be host to a lingering ghost, and maybe the most outlandish of all, there is talk of mutants who were created by the chemical spill, including a monstrous snake known as the peninsula python. And coming in at number 1, Lima Tuberculosis Hospital. The Lima Tuberculosis Hospital was a tuberculosis sanatorium built in 1911 to deal with the leading causes of death in the United States in the early 20th century. Opening in 1911, it held 24 beds originally and was remodeled in 1927 to hold 158 beds. The capacity changed to 138 patients after an additional remodel occurred in 1957. The hospital was then renamed Ottawa Valley Tuberculosis Hospital in 1960, and by 1970 it was nearly empty. In 1972, the use of the second floor was shuttered and the entire hospital closed its doors in 1973. While the hospital was winding down operation on January 10, 1972, it was agreed that the hospital would be transferred to the Allen County Board of Commissioners. Because of its relatively remote location and the use of hard-to-clean-up substances such as asbestos in the construction of the original 1911 building, the city of Lima did not prioritize demolition of the building. It's rumored to be haunted as well, and around Halloween of 2020, a large surge of trespassing at the site occurred, which led to an increased police presence and crackdown on trespassers. So don't even think of trying to visit.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky is a former tuberculosis hospital that is said to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. The hospital was operational from 1910 to 1961 and housed thousands of patients suffering from tuberculosis during that time. The building's dark history, which includes reports of medical experiments, neglect, and mistreatment of patients, has led to numerous reports of paranormal activity. Visitors to the abandoned hospital have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghosts of former patients and nurses. The most famous ghostly sighting at Waverly Hills is that of a nurse who is said to have taken her own life in one of the hospital's rooms. Her ghost has been seen by many visitors and is said to be one of the most active spirits in the building. The sanatorium's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to attract ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital. The Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital, located in Prince Edward County in Ontario, was a psychiatric hospital that operated from 1913 to 1999. The hospital was known for its very controversial treatments and overcrowding, and there are many stories of patient mistreatment and harm. When the hospital closed, it left behind a dark and eerie legacy. The abandoned hospital has become a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal investigators, with many reports of strange noises, unexplained occurrences, and ghostly apparitions. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former patient who is said to roam the halls, as well as the sound of footsteps, screams, which is horrifying, and other unexplained noises. Visitors to the hospital have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair, and many believe that the spirits of former patients still haunt the abandoned building today. In our number 8 spot today, we have Bannack. Bannack, Montana is a ghost town that was once a bustling gold mining community in the late 1800s. Today, however, the town is a popular destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers due to its reputation for being haunted. Visitors to Bannack have reported seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing unexplained noises, and feeling a very strong spiritual energy throughout the town. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former sheriff who was killed in the line of duty, as well as the ghost of a girl who is said to have died from illness in one of the town's homes. Others have reported feeling a strong sense of unease and fear, particularly in the town's abandoned schoolhouse. Very creepy. While the exact reason for Bannock's haunting remains a mystery. Many believe that the town's violent past, which includes the numerous killings and deaths that occurred in its heyday, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy that continues to haunt the town today. In our number 7 spot today, we have the CPR Hospital. The abandoned CPR Hospital is located in Saskatchewan, here in Canada, my home province, and it's a different kind of CPR than you might be thinking. In its past life, this hospital was once a hospital for Canadian Pacific Railway workers in the early 1900s. The hospital closed its doors in the 1980s and has been abandoned ever since. Today, the hospital is a popular spot for ghost hunters and urban explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to the hospital have reported hearing strange noises, including the sound of footsteps and the disembodied voices of former patients and staff. Some have even reported seeing apparitions, including the ghostly figure of a former nurse who died in a tragic accident. The hospital's haunting history is thought to be linked to the many tragedies that occurred during its time as a working hospital. Whether or not the hospital is truly haunted remains up for debate, but its eerie atmosphere and mysterious past continue to draw visitors from far and wide.
Number 6. Emily's Bridge. Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont is a 50-foot long bridge that's said to be the site of a young woman's death in the mid-1800s. According to legend, the woman, Emily, was supposed to meet her lover at the bridge to elope, but she ended up hanging herself from the rafters when he never showed up. Today, Emily's ghost is said to haunt the site, and instead of being full of sorrow, she's full of vengeance, as it's been reported that she claws at passing cars and even scratches the backs of pedestrians until they bleed. There are slightly less menacing spooks as well, like images of a white apparition and strange voices and footsteps coming from the tunnel. Number 5. Letchworth Village. Letchworth Village, located in New York, is a complex that used to be a mental institution from 1911 to 1996. Now, like most mental institutions, it closed after controversial experience on mental patients were condemned. The village, at the height of treatment in the 1960s, employed more than 10,000 locals who oversaw the patients on the grounds. Letchworth Village's reputation began its downward spiral in 1972 when journalist Geraldo Rivera published an expose on the cruel practices at Letchworth. Some things he revealed were, from the 1930s to 60s, Letchworth was a testing ground and then a frequent utilizer of electroconvulsive shock therapy, both as a treatment model and to see what effects it had on the brains of the feeble-minded morons, imbeciles, and idiots, to use the official medical terms of the times. Now, most of these patients didn't survive, or they ended up far worse than they started. In the 1930s and 40s, trepanning and lobotomies, physical and chemical, were carried out in secret, often as a part of research studies. More than 800 people died as a result of mistreatment or experimentation, and they were buried in unmarked graves at the far end of the Letchworth property. Number 4. The Shanghai Tunnels. The Shanghai Tunnels in Portland were built by Chinese workers during the time when Chinatown was the center for trade business. The tunnel's original design was for transporting goods from cargo ships to the inner city. By using the tunnels, the ship's crew could avoid the hassle of inner city traffic. Now, the tunnels get their name for the practice of kidnapping and selling men as workers on ships headed to East Asia. Restless, agitated spirits of men who were drugged and trafficked in the city ports during the early 19th century are said to haunt the underground tunnels, through which they were reportedly sold. Legend has it that local saloons contained entrances to the tunnels, enabling swindlers to prey on unsuspecting patrons and bring them directly underground before they even knew what was going on. Now, deep within the tunnels, travelers have reported feeling goosebumps as if someone is watching them from the shadows. Many people report seeing an Asian man walking past them in the tunnels, and explorers name the spirit Sam and say that he is responsible for turning off the lights in the bar basements. Sam also likes to move things around in the tunnels as explorers walk by. Now, up until 2023, visitors could also take walking tours to learn more about the dark history of the tunnels, but the tours have ended indefinitely. Number 3. Northern State Mental Hospital. Northern State Mental Hospital in Washington operated from 1912 to 1976. Like countless other mental asylums of the time, grisly experiments were performed on patients, some of which have even been rumored to be part of the top secret government program MK Ultra. Now, patients were being subjected to treatments like insulin shock therapy, lobotomies, and electroshock therapy. Heavy sedation with powerful drugs was also a common form of treatment, but truly it was just to keep patients in line and submissive. Now, countless patients died here, unclear, and rarely were the bodies claimed by families, so their disposal was left to the state. According to hospital records, 1,487 bodies are buried on the grounds of the asylum. The Washington state legislature cut off funding to the asylum, and in 1976, Northern State officially closed its doors. Now, with so much suffering, death, and disregard for human life, the place is just straight up haunted. Most of those who were admitted weren't actually suffering from severe mental illness and were sent to the asylum to live out the rest of their lives under lock and key. Those who dare visit the asylum grounds report strange phenomena such as cold spots, the feeling of being watched, disembodied voices, and the feeling of being touched. Now, some have seen strange shadows darting around the graveyard. Now, the most commonly encountered entity is that of a young girl with a red ball and a man chasing after her. They've been seen running around the property, though some report the girl standing alone in the graveyard as well. Number 2. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in West Virginia is full of history. Legend has it that this land in Rock, West Virginia was once occupied by the Clay family, whose sons and daughters were kidnapped and had their lives ended by Native Americans, while the father, Mitchell Clay, was out hunting. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park opened in 1926 and was abandoned 40 years later after a girl died on the swing set and a boy drowned in the pond. In 1985, Gaylord White, a former employee of the park, purchased the land with plans to reopen it, but those dreams were put to a stop after human remains were found buried on the property. There were 13 skeletons in total. White believes the premises to be haunted and says he's seen the girl who met her fatal end after a truck backed into her on the swings. And coming at number 1 is Summerwind Mansion. Summerwind Mansion in Wisconsin is believed to be one of the most haunted places in the US. This abandoned building is located on the shores of West Bay Lake in Vilas County on private land. The Lama were the owners of this mansion, and for 15 years of their occupancy, they experienced strange things. In the mid-1930s, as the family was busy dining, the door to the basement opened with a man appearing out of thin air. Limit shot at the spirit twice and chased him back into the cellar. The family later moved out, leaving the mansion empty until the 1970s when Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw purchased the building to turn it into a dream home. However, the paranormal activity chased the crew away, and the Hinshaws then took the renovation work into their own hands. Even then, the strange happenings did not stop. One night, Mary, Arnold's daughter, found a human skull and a handful of black hair in a hidden crawl space, which mysteriously disappeared when the police decided to investigate the house years later. The Hinshaws started behaving abnormally, and strange things still happen at that mansion, even after its destruction by lightning that occurred in 1988, leaving much of it completely destroyed.
At number 10 is the Island of Dolls in Mexico. Despite its World Heritage Site status alongside Mexico City, Xochimilco has garnered a reputation for its Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. Hidden amidst a labyrinth of canals, this place is famous for the countless dolls and doll parts that dangle from trees and lie scattered amongst the grass. It looks like something straight out of a horror film, but the truth behind this eerie display is even more unsettling. The island was once home to a man named Julian Santa Barea, who took up residence there. Barea's journey into the bizarre began after he found an unalived body in a nearby canal. Terrified by this tragic discovery, he started collecting dolls and displaying them around the island. He believed that these dolls had the power to ward off evil spirits and keep him safe. It's a creepy concept, to say the least. For the brave souls out there, you can hire a boat and attempt to convince the driver to take you to the island. From the safety of the water, you can observe the decaying house, the hanging dolls, and the unsettling atmosphere of the place. But let me tell you folks, this is one of those locations where it's probably best to admire from afar. The Island of Dolls is steeped in disturbing history that's best left unexplored. At number 9 is Kolmanskop, Namibia. A real-life ghost town has a story that might give you the chills. See, back in 1908, it was a bustling diamond mining hub, a place of extravagance and wealth. As fate would have it, richer diamond deposits were discovered south of Kolmanskop, leading to an instant exodus of this fair-weathered inhabitants. Today, this once thriving town is an eerie, sand-filled labyrinth of abandoned houses. It's not just an ordinary ghost town. Kolmanskop is famous for its appearances in movies like Dust Devil and The King is Alive. However, it's also renowned for its sinister aura. Those dilapidated structures are far from safe, with some on the brink of collapse. Add to the ever-shifting sands, which can easily trap the unsuspecting explorer. Yet the creepiness doesn't end there. Kolmanskop is a breeding ground for the paranormal stories and eerie occurrences. Many who've dared to enter these forsaken houses have reported strange and unsettling experiences. So while it might be tempting to explore the place, it's best to leave it off your bucket list and let Kolmanskop remain undisturbed in its eerie solitude. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is George's Church in Czech Republic. This is one of those abandoned places that should stay abandoned. Built back in 1352, this church has faced its fair share of troubles. Fires kept trying to claim it over the centuries, and things got even spookier in 1968 when the roof decided to collapse during a funeral service. The congregation thought it was haunted, and they wisely steered clear. But that didn't stop robbers and vandals from having a field day with it. Fast forward to 2012, and an art student decided to give the place a new lease on life by filling it with 30 ghost sculptures. Now it's known as the Ghost Church, and tourists from all around the world snap eerie photos and hang out with these lifeless specters. It's a creepy yet fascinating place, but remember, some abandoned spots should remain abandoned for good. Don't bother the ghosts. At number 7, Marco Island Dome Homes in Florida. These bizarre sci-fi-like structures are like something straight out of a Star Wars movie. Built back in 1981, they were meant to be a super cool, eco-friendly getaway for wealthy oil tycoons' family. But nature had other plans, and Florida's unforgiving weather and rising sea turned these homes into something out of a post-apocalyptic landscape. You won't find anyone living in these homes today, as it's highly unlikely anyone ever will. They stand as testament to man's ambition and nature's power. There are all kinds of theories and legends about why they exist, but the truth is, they're just a stark reminder that even the grandest human creations can be overtaken by the environment. So if you're thinking of exploring these dome houses, be cautious, and maybe leave the Jedi robes at home.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Bodie. Bodie, which is located in California, is a former mining town that is now a ghost town and state historic park. The town was established in 1859 and was the home to a thriving gold rush community until the early 1900s when the mines began to close. The town's isolation and very harsh living conditions made it a very difficult place to live, and it was eventually abandoned. The remaining buildings, which have been preserved in a state of quote arrested decay, make it a popular spot for tourists and ghost hunters alike. Visitors to Bodie have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even, of course, seeing a ghost or two. Some believe that the town's violent history, which includes shootouts and executions, has caused it to become haunted. Others believe that the spirits of former residents still roam the streets, unable to let go of their former lives. Bodie's haunting history and well-preserved buildings make it a fascinating but very eerie place to visit. In our number 5 spot today, we have Val Jalbert. The abandoned village of Val Jalbert, located in Quebec, Canada, was once a thriving pulp mill town in the 1920s. However, after the mill closed in the 1940s, the town was abandoned and left to decay. Today, the village is a very popular spot for tourists and explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to Val Jalbert have reported feeling a sense of unease and hearing strange noises, including whispers and footsteps. I think that whispers is like the worst. No, voices is one thing, whispers is worse. There are also rumors of a ghostly figure that haunts the village's church, as well as other apparitions that have been spotted throughout the abandoned buildings. Many people believe that the town's tragic history, which includes a devastating fire and several deaths, has caused it to become haunted. The abandoned village of Val Jalbert is a fascinating and eerie place to visit, and its haunting history and ghostly tales continue to intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 4 spot today, we have Six Flags New Orleans. Six Flags New Orleans, of course located in Louisiana, was once a very popular theme park that closed its doors after Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in 2005. Since then, the park has been abandoned and left to decay, leading many to believe that it is haunted. Visitors to the park have reported hearing strange noises and seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghost of a former employee who is said to have died on the property. There are also rumors of ghostly figures that can be seen walking through the abandoned park at night. While many of the park's attractions have been dismantled at this point, some of the structures still stand, including the abandoned roller coasters and the very creepy, dilapidated clown head that once served as the park's entrance. The park's haunting history and eerie eerie atmosphere have made it a very popular destination for urban explorers and ghost hunters alike. However, visitors are warned that the property is unsafe and trespassing is strictly prohibited. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Central Experimental Farm. Located in Ottawa, Ontario, this farm is a research facility that has been in operation since 1886. However, despite its scientific purpose, the farm has a reputation for being haunted. Visitors to the farm have reported seeing ghosts, hearing unexplained noises, and also feeling an eerie presence. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former farm worker who died on the property, as well as the ghost of a woman who is said to haunt the farm's historic farmhouse. There are also rumors of a ghostly horse-drawn carriage that can be seen driving through the farm's fields. While the exact reason for the farm's haunting remains unknown, many believe that the many tragedies that have occurred on the property, including accidents and deaths, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy. The Central Experimental Farm is a fascinating and eerie location, and its haunting history and the ghostly tales surrounding it continue to intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 2 spot today, we have Centralia. Located in Pennsylvania, this town is often referred to as one of the gateways to hell. That is due to the fire that spread in an underground coal mine underneath the town in 1962. The fire, which is believed to have been started by a trash fire that spread to the coal seam, has been burning for over 60 years and has caused the town to be evacuated due to toxic fumes and the risk of collapse. As the fire still blazes underground, it causes the smoke and poisonous gases to rise up from the ground, not only causing an eerie appearance, but also a very serious health hazard. The temperatures can be so hot in the area that one guy's backyard was measured at 626 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes the fire will also burn through supports underground, which in the end turns into a sinkhole. This has caused pets, wildlife, and residents to unsuspectingly get swallowed up into the hole. In 1984, the US government ordered a total evacuation of the town, but a handful of residents refused to leave and even went to court over the right to stay in the town for as long as they live. The abandoned buildings, cracked and buckled roads, and just eerie silence makes it a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts. Some believe that the town's dark history combined with the ongoing fire has caused the area to become haunted. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is known for its haunting history. The prison was operational for almost 150 years from 1829 until its closure in 1971, and it was once the home to some of the country's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone. The prison's imposing Gothic architecture and innovative design, which placed an emphasis on solitary confinement and rehabilitation, made it one of the most famous prisons of its time. However, its harsh conditions and notorious history also make it a popular spot for ghost hunters and people who love all things paranormal. Visitors have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghosts, including the ghost of a guard who was killed by an inmate. Some even claim to have been touched or pushed by unseen forces. The prison's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to fascinate as well as frighten visitors to this day.
We're starting off our trip to the Golden State with the Gates of Hell in Hacienda Heights. What is known as the Gates of Hell is this big barbed wire fence surrounding a piece of property that is rumored to have been a sanatorium back in the 40s. The story goes that this hospital had been shut down due to malpractice. And there are other stories that the building beyond this fence was the home of Satan worshippers who practiced all kinds of dark rituals on the property. As to how this rumor got started, well, beyond this ominous barbed wire fence is the back entrance to a building. Those few who have managed to sneak a glimpse of it have apparently seen all sorts of pentagrams and cultish symbols drawn all over it, and peeking inside the windows, you can supposedly see red stains covering the inside. Now, these could just be nothing more than made up stories, but many people claim to have this uneasy feeling that washes over them when they pass by this gate. There has to be some reason for that barbed wire keeping people out, or maybe it's there to keep something in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. By the way, we have awesome content coming your way on the daily. Alright, the notorious Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is a private campground located in Monte Rio, California. It's known for hosting an annual invite-only retreat for members of the Bohemian Club, a private men's club that only allows highfalutin men from fields in politics, business, and the arts. Now, the area isn't always closed off to the public, just when this annual gathering takes place. And what goes on in these gatherings at Bohemian Grove is incredibly secretive. And there are very strict rules in place for members about maintaining this secrecy. The most famous event at Bohemian Grove is said to be the cremation of care ceremony, which is a symbolic ritual performed in front of a large owl-shaped statue. Nobody, other than the members, of course, know what this ritual entails. But you have a bunch of powerful people meeting in the middle of the woods in secret performing ceremonies. No surprise why most people on the outside find this incredibly suspect. I don't know. Let your mind go wild. Do they sacrifice a poor person every year and then drink their blood while dancing in the nude around the big owl statue? That's what I picture. I picture Wicker Man type stuff going on. Like, what needs to be so secret about a camping trip? I've never been roasting marshmallows and catching fish in the woods with my buddies and turned to them and been like, guys, this stays in the woods here. None of this gets out. Alright, the hidden city under Mount Shasta. Now, unlike everything else you'll see on this list, this place is only rumored to exist, but the story behind it is pretty fascinating. According to the legend, there's said to be this hidden underground city or a network of tunnels beneath the majestic Mount Shasta in Northern California. There are a few different versions of this legend, but the gist is that there's this hidden city inhabited by an advanced and enlightened civilization. Some say they're remnants of an ancient civilization, extraterrestrial beings, or even spiritually advanced beings known as Lemurians. Lemuria is a mythical lost continent in the Pacific, kinda in the same vein as Atlantis, and according to the legend, Lemurians found refuge in the tunnels beneath the mountain after their continent sank into the ocean. There have also been a good number of UFO sightings around Mount Shasta, and people who have claimed to actually encounter the underground city, like the prospector J.C. Brown, who claimed to discover the city back in 1904. He said he'd found a cave that sloped down 11 miles while prospecting for gold, and inside the cave, he found an entire city filled with gold and artifacts like shields and weapons, even the remains of large mummified humanoids, some of which were 10 feet tall. Brown didn't come out with his story until years later, telling a man named John C. Root about his tale. John gathered a search team, but on the day the group was supposed to meet, J.C. Brown apparently didn't show up. Not only that though, he was never seen or heard from again. So, I don't know, did he actually show up? And they went down there, they found the stuff, and then they were like, we want the gold to ourselves, and like took him out, maybe? Who knows? Next on the list is Ano Nuevo Island. This place hasn't always been an island. It used to be connected to the mainland through a narrow strip of land that acted as a bridge, but water levels rose, eventually cutting it off. All that sits on this piece of land now are a handful of abandoned buildings and the residence, which used to be the home of a lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse is gone now, but the keeper is said to still linger in the afterlife anyway. The island is completely abandoned and off limits, now a protected wildlife preserve, home to seals and sea lions, but some say that on certain nights they've seen the windows of the old lighthouse keeper's home light up as if someone or something still looms over the island, keeping watch. In the LA suburb of Downey sits a fenced-off, boarded-up set of homes and buildings known as the Old LA County Poor Farm. The history of this place dates back to 1887, when the LA County Board of Supervisors decided to create a facility for the homeless. They bought 124 acres of farmland near Downey, functioned as a place for them to stay but also to work. It was a working farm with buildings to house residents, offices, and even common areas. Over the years, the farm expanded to around 400 acres by 1910 and produced a variety of crops and livestock. It was a self-sustaining operation, providing food for residents and selling all the excess produce for profit. Like, what an awesome idea. We need stuff like this today. Things eventually changed, of course, though. In 1915, a new superintendent took charge. The Great Depression also brought its challenges, with funding drying up and a tent city being constructed. During World War II, part of the place became an army base, and after the war, War, the facility evolved into a hospital, abandoning the farm aspect by the 50s. And then by the 80s, the aging hospital moved to a new facility across the street, leaving the old poor farm abandoned. It's now completely off limits to the public, surrounded by no trespassing signs and barbed wire fences. Creepy story though. In 2006, the military came to the area for a training exercise, and Marines stumbled upon a freezer containing tons of mummified body parts, likely from the hospital, but that's still really creepy.
At number 6 is the Buz Ludza monument nestled in the heart of Bulgaria. Imagine a place that looks like a UFO touchdown site. This bizarre structure was constructed towards the end of the Cold War and was intended to serve as the grandiose headquarters for the Bulgarian Communist Party. Decked out with posters of Lenin and Marx and a ceiling adorned with a glimmering red star, this place was no stranger to the strange events and political grandeur. But here's the twist. This intriguing monument was abandoned and sealed off from the public's prying eyes back in 1989. So while the temptation to explore this otherworldly dome is strong, it's vital to heed the keep out signs and respect the history this place holds, even if it means leaving your inner adventurer dormant. At number 5 is the Bielitz-Hillstatten Hospital in Germany, folks. This is a place where history and horror truly converge. This hospital's got a sinister past that'll send shivers down your spine. It's not just a spooky building, it's practically an encyclopedia of nightmares. It played host to tuberculosis patients, and if that's not eerie enough, it also tended to mustard gas and machine pew-pew victims during World War I, even harboring the infamous guy, the bad guy. Fast forward to World War II, and it was the go-to spot for fascist soldiers' medical needs. Post-World War II, the Soviets took over, using it as a military hospital until the Berlin Wall fell. Now, only a few wards are in use, but the rest, well, they're slowly being reclaimed by nature and vandals. Walk through those abandoned surgery and psychiatric wards and you'd think you're on a set of American Horror Story Asylum. At number 4 is Power Plant IM in Charleroi, Belgium, which might pique your curiosity as it's an abandoned industrial marvel, but it's on our list of top 10 places to steer clear of for a reason. Built back in 21, that being 100 years ago, not 2, this mammoth coal-burning facility boasted a colossal cooling tower capable of chilling 480,000 gallons of water every minute during its prime. However, its energy production came at a significant environmental cost, contributing to a staggering 10% of Belgium's carbon dioxide emissions. Greenpeace took notice and successfully lobbied for its closure in 2007. While the towering remnants of the power plant IM offer an eerie, picturesque backdrop, stepping inside is a risky proposition. The abandoned structures hide potential hazards, including structural instability and toxic remnants. This isn't a journey for the faint of heart, but rather an ill-advised attempt to explore a place where safety takes a back seat. So if you're after adventure, there are certainly safer destinations to satiate your curiosity about abandoned locations. At number 3 is Kennecott, Alaska, a once bustling mining town, witnessed a flourishing copper industry worth a jaw-dropping $200 million from 1911 to 1938. That's like all kinds of billions now. It was a complete package. They had their own hospital, a skating rink, a tennis court, and even a dairy. But the years have not been kind to this place. Most of the buildings have been left to rot over 6 decades. It's a hauntingly beautiful ghost town, a snapshot of the past's glory. The National Park Service swooped in, taking control of the many structures and lands in 1998. Today you can visit the visitor center between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and if you want a unique event venue, the Recreation Hall is actually up for rent. I wouldn't. At number 2, Lake Reshen Bell Tower in Italy, a mysterious relic of the past emerging from the depths of Regency, a product of human intervention. The eerie beauty of this 14th century tower jutting out of the water gives off a surreal, otherworldly vibe. It's a bit like something you'd find in a fairy tale, but trust me, you're not gonna be in a Disney movie here. What makes it even more intriguing is the history behind it. See, beneath the calm waters lie the remains of a submerged village intentionally sacrificed to build the dam. Their stories, hidden beneath the surface, offer a haunting reminder of the past. Though it may seem like an inviting adventure, don't be too hasty. The lake might freeze in the winter, allowing you to walk right up to the tower, but there are some dangers in doing that, obviously. At number 1, Nicosia International Airport in Cyprus. It's a real haunting place, and it's got a history that's both fascinating and eerie. Back in the day when it was a bustling airport, a place where people were coming and going, embarking on exciting journeys. But then, in 74, the Turkish invasion of Cyprus happened, and the whole landscape changed. The airport was abandoned, and what's left now is like a time capsule that's been untouched for nearly 50 years. The planes that once soared through the skies are there, but they've turned into rusty relics of aviation history, just sitting out in the the open, exposed to the elements. It's like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie where the world has moved on, but this place is stuck in time. But that's not all. Inside the terminal, the check-in counters and boarding areas have all gathered thick layers of dust and occasional bird droppings. It's like a scene from a long-forgotten era. Exploring this airport may sound cool, but honestly, it's a journey that's just best left to the imagination and the history books and the YouTube videos.
We're gonna start things off though with bog body. This is about as unsettling as it sounds. Bog is just such a gross word. Bog. Nothing good could ever come out of a bog. So bog bodies are human remains that were preserved in peat bogs. And peat bogs are these wet, swampy areas with a ton of decomposed plant material. The acidic and oxygen deprived conditions in bogs can actually keep bodies from completely rotting away, so they actually kinda get mummified. Turns out a lot of ancient cultures in Northern Europe used to bury their dead this way in order to preserve them. Archaeologists in Scotland, Ireland, Sweden, the Netherlands have come across some of these eerie bog bodies, and some of them are incredibly old. The oldest found to date being the Koverup man in Denmark, dated to 8000 BCE. Some of the remains are just skeletons now, but there are a surprising amount that are so well preserved you can actually see their facial features, hair, and even their clothes. There's a bit of a mystery about these corpses as well. It's not entirely clear why some bodies would have been buried this way. Some researchers think they were victims of sacrifices or rituals, or they met their end through some ancient form of justice. Up next on the list, we have the unluckiest man. Just look at this poor sap. This is the remains of a man who clearly met a very unfortunate end during the volcanic disaster in Pompeii. You could say everyone in Pompeii was incredibly unlucky, but this guy, whole other level. I mean, as horrific as this must have been, that image of the skeleton crushed under the rock, just with the feet sticking out, it's almost so awful. Kind of goes all the way around to being funny. I don't know, there's something comedically cartoony about it. It's very Bugs Bunny. When this guy was first discovered though, scientists thought the eruption of Mount Vesuvius had hurled a boulder into the air, crushing him as he attempted to flee. Pretty awful, but it would have been pretty quick, right? I mean, you get crushed by a boulder, you pretty much die instantly, especially if it's your head. Their initial assumption was wrong though. Scientists removed the boulder only to discover that the guy's skull was still completely intact, so it didn't crush his body like they initially thought. He would have likely died of asphyxiation, which I think would have been a much worse way to go. Would have been a lot slower. So yeah, poor guy. Rukpund Lake. Back in 1942, a forest ranger discovered hundreds of human skeletons at the bottom of this glacial lake. Not just a few, we're talking about a whole bunch of bones. So how did these poor souls end up there? Some say it was a group of pilgrims caught in a sudden and violent hailstorm. Others think it was an army that got caught in the crossfire of some ancient battle, and the bodies were dumped in the lake. Then there's the folklore. Locals have about a legendary goddess, Nanda Devi, getting angry and unleashing her wrath on those who dared to trespass her sacred territory. Recent studies have actually revealed that there's not just one event that led to the skeletons at the bottom of the lake though. Different groups of people met their mysterious fate at different times. In 2003, a team from National Geographic retrieved several bones from the lake and discovered that there were actually still small amounts of flesh attached to some of them. I think this lake is just cursed. I'd stay far away from it. Alright, if I ever find myself in Italy, which I really hope I do one day, I gotta add this place to my list of destinations. Capuchin Crypt in Sicily. This is a burial site, but instead of your typical graveyard where all the bodies are stored underground and out of view, this place has them right out in the open. Rows upon rows of skeletons and mummies, all still wearing the clothing of their time, line the walls, and tourists can walk through the place and look at them. Located beneath the Capuchin Monastery in Palermo, the catacombs have been in use since the 16th century. They were first intended for the burial of Capuchin friars, but over time, many of the local elite wanted to be stored there and started paying to have their remains kept in the crypt when they died. The catacombs are divided into various sections. One of these sections is the Rosalia Lombardo Chapel, named after a 2-year-old girl whose body is remarkably well preserved, eerily so. The bodies are arranged along the walls or displayed in open coffins. It's certainly eerie, but pretty fascinating, especially seeing them still wearing the clothing that would have been common when they died. Just makes you remember that these were real individuals with their own stories, families, and lives, rather than, a tombstone with a name and a bunch of bones 6 feet underground out of view. Next on the list, we have the discovery of a mass grave containing the remains of 54 Viking men. So in 2009, archaeologists in Dorset were excavating land where a new road was going to be constructed, the Weymouth Relief Road. While this excavation was taking place, they stumbled on this shallow mass grave containing the remains of 54 men who they later realized had been Vikings. They were all decapitated. The bodies had been haphazardly tossed into the grave, and the heads had been placed in a pile off to the side. They'd likely attempted a raid on an Anglo-Saxon territory and were unsuccessful, being rounded up and meeting their grisly ends at the hand of a sword. But it was clear that these hadn't been quick, merciless deaths. There were multiple wounds on the men, aside from, their heads having been detached from their shoulders. One skull even had a large hole at the top, meaning it had likely been lobbed off, exposing the man's brain before he died. And one guy had his fingers sliced off. He likely tried to grab the sword as it was coming down. Pretty awesome. Anyway, seemed like a really fun time to be alive back then, doesn't it? The Point Sur Lighthouse is surrounded by ghostly tales. It was constructed in 1889, helping to navigate vessels along the Big Sur coastline. One tale about this place is that the original lighthouse keeper continues to watch over the tower till this day. Future keepers have had the creepy experience of being all alone in the tower at night, only to hear labored footsteps ascending the stairs and the sounds of huffs and puffs coming from the stairs. But when they've called out to ask who's there or to go and look, the stairway is completely empty. There are also stories about a woman in a vintage dress wandering near the lighthouse, and some say she's the spirit of a woman who died in a shipwreck. Next on the list is the Lincoln Heights Jail. This was a pretty notorious jail. Big names like Al Capone used to be housed here. The jail has been around since 1931. It was originally constructed to hold about 625 prisoners, but by the 50s, it was packing in about 2,800 folks. You can only imagine what the conditions were like in that place. And in the 50s and 60s, when LA was cracking down on LGBT activity, the place became known for something else. Cops were going after queer individuals, making arrests, and the prison had its own separate wing just for these prisoners. In 1965, the city decided to shut the facility down. It sat empty for ages, with people tossing around ideas for renovations, a trade school, a rooftop garden. In 1979, the Bilingual Foundation for the Arts moved in, but by 2014, it was abandoned yet again. Fast forward to 2017, the city wanted ideas to revive the place. The Lincoln Property Company and 15 Group got the nod to turn it into a Lincoln Heights Makers District. Public market, amphitheater, all that kind of jazz, but the place ended up being really tough to renovate. It was full of hazardous material, decay, and getting the place up to current environmental standards was tough. So the project was ultimately abandoned, and the place still sits empty to this day. Next up, we have the Sunken City. This spot is completely off limits to the public, although you probably wouldn't think it with how many people fart around in the place. The Sunken City is located in San Pedro and got its name in 1929 when a landslide caused a part of the coastline to plunge into the ocean. This left behind this series of concrete foundations, streets, and sidewalks that now sit below the cliffs. The area became popular for how eerie and surreal the landscape is. Even though it's been technically closed off to the public since '87, because of safety concerns, people were climbing the unstable cliffs and it became a liability. They're not supposed to go wandering around there, and the city has to put up fences and signs to make sure everyone gets the message. Trespassing can result in fines or even arrests, but people continue to sneak in. When I say people, I mean like young people. Let's be real. It looks beautiful though. There's palm trees, really cool looking graffiti. I get why people would want to check it out, but apparently it can be pretty dangerous. Forget the fines, people often get mugged here or worse. Let's talk about Murphy Ranch, sitting in the hills near Los Angeles. So back in the 30s, a couple with some pretty unconventional ideas decided to build a self-sufficient compound there. And by unconventional ideas, I mean, they were incredibly anti-Semitic. They thought the world was headed for some major chaos, and seeing as World War II was looming, kinda was, so they built this compound, which ended up becoming something of a base for American Third Reich sympathizers during the Second World War. The compound had living quarters, a power station, and even a water storage system. It was a haven for them, and other like-minded pricks, but the US government got wind of it and shut it down in 1941, the day after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The remains of Murphy Ranch now sit completely abandoned and completely off limits. Old dilapidated buildings and graffiti-covered walls are all that remain. Yes, graffiti, people still do sneak in. Next on the list we have Alcatraz. This is one of the most notorious former prisons in the entire world. The amount of stories about this place is damn near endless, and it's said that some of the former prisoners still linger within the building till this day. Back in the 1850s, it started as a military setup, housing soldiers, but then in 1934, it switched gears and became a high-security prison, holding big-name crooks like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. Life on Alcatraz was no joke for inmates. They faced solitary confinement, hard labor, and punishment was incredibly tough. On top of that, the place was said to be this impossible area to escape, being out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by ice-cold water. Oddly enough, though, there were actually multiple escape attempts here, a whopping 14 to be exact. The most famous attempt was in 1962 when Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers disappeared into thin air. Some say they actually made it to shore, started new lives in secret, but others think they drowned in the frigid water. Others who tried weren't as lucky. Guards shot some or just caught him before they even got.
Number 10. Newbury Airplane Boneyard. In Newbury, Ohio, resident Walter Saplata hosted a collection of military aircrafts from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Though often called an airplane graveyard, Walter would have preferred the term sanctuary, as he was saving the aircrafts from being turned into scrap metal. The sanctuary featured approximately 20 stray aircrafts that Walter collected from his scrapyard job in Cleveland, junking thousands of warplane engines that were declared surplus, according to his son Wally Saplata in a November 2007 issue of Air and Space magazine. Walter used to open his property to the public, but in recent years, the aircraft boneyard has been kept private. He passed away in November 2010, and today it is unclear what remains of the aircraft graveyard. Number 9. Geauga Lake Amusement Park. What was once the world's largest theme park is now an overgrown land of decaying roller coasters, empty concession stands, and abandoned ticket booths. In 1925, the park cemented its place in amusement park history when the Big Dipper roller coaster was built. At the time, it was the largest roller coaster ever built, but soon tragedy struck. Following all of its success, the park experienced some setbacks. In 1942, the park was hit by a tornado, 6 people were injured, and the park experienced a lot of structural damages, around $50,000. Further tragedy struck in 1952 when a massive fire engulfed parts of the park, destroying many key features of the park, including the famous dance hall, the theater, the roller rink, and the bowling alley, amounting to $500,000 in damages. From 2000 to 2004, the park was expanded and became Six Flags Ohio. From 2004 to 2007, it became known as Geauga Lake again under the ownership of Cedar Fair. But on September 21st, 2007, Cedar Fair announced that the park would not be reopening, and it has been abandoned ever since. Number 8. Cincinnati's abandoned subway. In the 20th century, Cincinnati decided to build a subway system after canals quickly became even more of a nuisance than they had been when they were bringing in trade. The plan was made in 1912 to build a 16-mile rapid transit rail system in a loop around the city, with a branch undergoing and heading downtown. More than 80% of the people of Cincinnati said yes to the new railway, but work on it didn't start until after World War I on January 28, 1920. Despite several delays, the 2-mile underground portion of the subway was completed in 1923. Proposals came and went in the 30s, but none were implemented. A 1948 study finally ended the Cincinnati subway for good, though efforts to do something with the tunnels have been constantly ongoing for more than half a century. Ideas have included a bomb shelter, a shopping and nightlife district, a massive wine cellar, and more rapid transit. The latest proposal is for another subway. I-75 was built, destroying a large segment of the underground passage, but one of the city's best-kept secrets is the fact that sections of the original subway still remain, including all 4 of the stations put in during initial construction. construction. Today, all these passages are sealed off and they are used by Cincinnati waterworks only. Most of the entrances have been gated or concreted over. Now, access is both illegal and extremely difficult, and no people, this is not a challenge. Number 7. Chippewa Lake Park. Tucked away in the Medina County, there's a rusted, lost, forgotten Ferris wheel. What was once Chippewa Lake Park is now just a few piles of amusement park ruins and the lone Ferris wheel. From 1878 to 1978, the amusement park was a popular, thriving destination for family entertainment. It closed after the final owner, Continental Business Enterprises, closed it due to lack of attendance. After the park's closure, its rise and structures were left largely untouched and unmaintained for over 40 years. Today, remnants of it creepily stand abandoned, rusted, and long forgotten. And fun fact, in 2008, a cast and crew from Los Angeles filmed the horror film Closed for the Season there.
Alright, we've talked about Vikings, mummies, and an unlucky man. Now let's move on to vampires, or at least people who were believed to have been vampires. Yeah, these folks were pretty unlucky too. Vampire burials have been discovered in various parts of the world. These were basically any burial aimed at preventing the dead from returning from the dead as vampires or revenants. There are of course tons of different beliefs throughout many different cultures, but one reason someone could have come back as a supposed vampire was if they suffered a particularly cruel death or were believed to be like out of their minds when they were alive, for example. The point is, there were all kinds of methods used in order to prevent them from returning from the grave. In some cases, corpses were buried with bricks or stones placed in their mouths. This was believed to prevent the deceased from rising and feasting on the blood of the living. The idea was that the brick or stone would inhibit the vampire's ability to bite and feed, because they just wouldn't be able to just take it out for whatever reason. Pretty pathetic attempt there to stop a vampire. Another method involved placing a sickle or another sharp object across the throat or waist of the deceased in the grave. This one's pretty obvious. It's a trap! The corpse wakes up, goes to get up, and oops, there goes its head. It's a much better plan, I think. In some cultures, bodies were buried with heavy stones placed on top of them. Again, pretty simple idea behind that one. And some burials involve just physically securing the coffin to prevent the supposed vampire from escaping. Nails or other fasteners were used to seal the coffin. Next, we have the recent discovery of plastic rocks. So scientists studying Brazil's Trindade Island, a very important nesting site for green turtles, have made a pretty alarming discovery. Many of the rocks on the island are now intertwined with melted plastic, forming a new type of rock called plastiglomeratus. Kinda messed up, really shows the extent of human influence on our planet. Fernanda Avalar Santos, a geologist from the Federal University of Paraná, and her team conducted chemical tests to identify the types of plastics that were in these rocks. The primary source of pollution they found is fishing nets, which are common debris in Trindade Island beaches. These nets, which are dragged by marine currents and accumulate on the beach, melt and blend with the natural materials of the beach when temperatures rise. Trindade Island is a crucial conservation spot for green turtles, attracting thousands each year for egg laying. The island is mostly uninhabited, with only members of the Brazilian Navy present, maintaining a base and protecting the nesting turtles. The plastic-infused rocks were discovered in a protected area near the turtle nesting grounds. Santos said that this finding is pretty unsettling. The plastic pollution, mismanagement of waste, and garbage in the oceans are now becoming intertwined with geological material. That is really bizarre. Crazy. Next on the list, we have the Necromancer's Cave. How awesome does that sound? How can I not put that on the list? Necromancer's Cave? In 2009, archaeologists exploring Toimim Cave in Jerusalem made a really cool discovery. Deep in the cave, they found human skulls, oil lamps, and bronze daggers. It doesn't take an archaeologist to piece together that there were some rituals going on here, but these rituals were more specifically related to necromancy, the art of communicating with the dead, and that I would not have been able to guess. The exact findings included 120 oil lamps dating back to the late 2nd to 4th centuries CE. The lamps were intentionally placed in hidden, hard-to-reach crevices, which seemed to imply they weren't just used to light up the cave. Along with the lamps were weapons like daggers and axe heads, and 3 human skulls. No other human bones were found. Ancient papyrus scrolls from the same era detailed spells and customs honoring the cave. These included instructions on restraining and sealing the mouths of skulls and raising spirits with skulls. The researchers put together that these spells actually aligned with the artifacts found in the cave. At the time, the cave was thought to be a portal to the underworld. The oil lamps, including the 120 that were discovered, were believed to lure spirits to the realm of the living. Alright, ever wanted to know what a mummy sounds like? Well, we're getting pretty close. Just back in 2020, researchers set out to replicate the voice of Egyptian priest Nasimun, who's been housed in the Leeds City Museum since 1823. So how did they recreate the voice of a man who's been dead for 3,000 years? Well, they digitally recreated all his mouth parts and then 3D printed it. That's my simple way of explaining it. Then they used one of those electro links, voice box things, what I want to talk through like this, and then fed it through the 3D printed mouth, and you get this. Kind of sounds exactly what I picture a mummy sounding like, to be honest. Like, you know? And finally, we have evidence of people being fed to vicious animals. It's not like that's unheard of in history, in the history of our species, but finding physical evidence of this is pretty fascinating. In recent digs in Teotihuacan, the ancient Mesoamerican city in Mexico, archaeologists stumbled upon something pretty wild. Among a bunch of unearthed remains of predatory animals, mostly big cats, were also human bones, which has a pretty dark implication. People were fed to these animals. Now, what were these animals being kept for? Likely for sacrificial rituals. So they kept the animals alive for a time by tossing in some very unlucky human beings their way. The question is, were they dead already, or were they fed to the animals while they were still alive?
If you enjoyed these abandoned locations, then you will for sure enjoy these secrets that the government tried to hide too. Click now to not miss another government secret.